There are a row of us. We'll introduce ourselves in a moment. But before we started, I just wondered if any of you had seen that picture before. Just show of hands if you had. Okay. Well, that's not bad. Okay. And we won't introduce Connor because we'll do it with the film in a moment. But this guy here is Connor Sparrowhawk. So my name is George Julian, and I'm an independent freelancer. I'm a knowledge transfer consultant, and I work with universities and researchers to try and bring and broker their work to practice and service users. And I have been the very informal and organically self-appointed campaign manager for the campaign we're about to talk about. It's all voluntary, and it's a labour of love for everyone, I think, and you'll see how passionate we are about it. But Chris.
I'm Chris Hatton. I'm an academic here at Lancaster. My work is in public health, particularly around health inequalities and social inequalities experienced by people with learning disabilities, and how that plays into, trying to improve that. And obviously, kind of early deaths of people with learning disabilities and economy in particular is one aspect.
My name is Hannah Morgan. I'm a lecturer in disability studies here at the university. I've been involved in the campaign because I know Sarah Connor's mum was a member of our disability studies community, and in particular I've been thinking about how his experience can be an important part of professional education.
I'm Imogen Tyler.
Could you speak up a little bit?
I'm Imogen Tyler. I'm a sociologist here at Lancaster, and my work is, I guess, mainly on inequalities of various kinds, but also got particular interest in culture and kind of what I call cultural and political economies of inequality, and also particular interest in kind of neoliberalism and the kind of demise of the welfare state. And I'm currently working on a project on stigma as a kind of form of as a kind of political economy. And I'm kind of connected in a very sort of distant way, but a very also enthusiastic way, to the Justice for LB campaign for a number of reasons that I'll talk about, partly because I've got a really specific interest in disability in my work as one of the inequalities that I'm interested in, but also because I'm really interested in it as a kind of case study for welfare reform in contemporary Britain, for the demise of a publicly funded National Health Service, and for the lack of accountability in the particular forms of governmentality that we have at the moment. So how accountability structures are changing in relationship to what you might call democratic forms. So I'm really interested in this as a case study of how we might think about those things, as well as think about this individual case and how it relates to questions of human value and life, but also the bigger questions this case raises, questions of accountability and on and offline activisms as ways of responding or trying to get accountability. How do you get a life to count or a death to count by using a variety of digital and online strategies as well as offline ones around death? So that's some of the things that I'm interested in this case.
And I should check this, but I think I'm correct in saying that none of us have ever met Connor.
No.
Okay. Which is potentially interesting given some of the discussions yesterday about how people come to life or can come to life after death. So none of us have ever met Connor. We're going to start by showing this film. It's a 15-minute film, and it captures a lot of what happened rather than us talk about what happened. It was produced by a bunch of people with learning disabilities in Oxford, part of an organisation called My Life, My Choice, self-advocates who worked with filmmakers, again Oxford-based filmmakers, to produce this film to explain about the campaign and about COP.
Stories about him, but one of the things that sort of sticks in my mind now is the way he used to say mum all the time. Mum, mum, mum. And there'd always be, like lots and lots of mums, and I'd sort of say, what? What do you want? And we'd get caught up in this where he'd just say mum, and I'd be saying, what do you want? And I'd finish it off by saying, do you like Laurie's mum?
If mum made him do the dishwasher, he'd like, his talking would be very about mum, but it would be like ridiculous things like she should be put in prison or it's a breach of his human rights and stuff to do the dishwasher.
I'd say how was school today, like you do to kids, and he once told me that there'd been a knife fight in class, which struck me as unlikely. So I said to him, well, that's terrible, you know, what did the teacher say? And apparently the teacher just said no knives in class, you know, as opposed to it's okay, but, you know, playground. He told people that we made him live in the cupboard under the stairs.
He was very repetitious. So if he asked you something, he'd see a picture of a bus, and he'd be talking about the bus, and he'd say, who's the bus driver? And I'd say, well, I don't know. Who's the bus driver? And this would go on for a while, and in the end I'd give up and I'd say, oh, it's Fred Brown. Oh, Fred.
He had a huge appetite. He would eat from morning till night if you let him. He'd only have to see a cake and it would be gone.
Oh, you were the one who always brought the cakes.
I brought the cakes.
So then he'd sort of sit really close to Sue, you know, just to say, I'm your best friend today, Sue. Can I have the cake?
Every time you tell something, like, why? Just like, when the main question you ask was why, you just have to keep thinking of something to say after it and just say why again. I don't think I've ever heard a man and just go, oh, that sounds interesting. There'd always be another why. Until you finally just went, I don't know, Connor, I can't, I have no idea.
We were in a big family group one day, and he went round all the family going, why? And my youngest daughter, his auntie Sam, said to him, for goodness sake, Connor, turn your why box off. And he sort of looked at her. And then he understood, and this huge grin across his face. He thought that was so funny.
And he got into this thing about guns, and he told me that his guns were so big that he and his guns couldn't sleep in his bed at the same time. So he wanted him with his guns on the floor, all his arms in the bed. Crazy images like that.
He laughed at the worst jokes, like. He had some good jokes. He always told us the same jokes, but they were always funny because he told them like the best way.
He was just funny all the time. I mean, he spent one Saturday afternoon making playlists on his iPod, and he did it so carefully. And when I had a look later, he put one song on each playlist, that's what he wanted to do. So it was funny. Some of the things he did, some of the things he was very funny in what he was doing. He was entertaining, and we don't know whether he was being funny for us. And other things he did were just funny because he sort of crashed through all the rules and did things that other people wouldn't do. And I always liked that. He picked the right rules to break, I think, and sort of showed us how silly we were quite often.
He loved ambulance crews. Every time they came to the house and we'd had a seizure or something, I mean, you know, that was quite a lot of compensation for having had the seizure, was the fact that you got to spend 45 minutes with the paramedics and their kit. And they were always, you know, always brilliant with him. He loved that. You know, he just had some particular needs, and as long as you understood his way of looking at the world, you know, he was relatively straightforward to deal with. But in that, when he got to coming towards adulthood and transition into adult services, his behaviour did start to deteriorate quite a lot. He became more difficult and more unhappy. He was clearly unhappy and depressed, I think. But very difficult to explore that with him because of, you know, the issues of his development.
It was awful seeing Connor change his personality so dramatically over the space of a couple of months and become really unreachable in a way that he'd never been before. That was really distressing. He ended up punching his teaching assistant, who he loved, in the face, I think, on the Friday before he went into the unit. And that was, you know, the step that we sort of thought, actually, ironically, this could end up with somebody being seriously hurt here. On the Monday, I assumed, because we'd been really ringing the crisis line, which was a joke, on the Friday, I assumed on the Monday that the cavalry would arrive when everybody was back at work. And in fact, nobody got in touch at all, which was astonishing. And then on a Tuesday, a friend of mine rang and said, I've just been told about a place down the road at Slade.
But we did think, genuinely, that we were doing, not only did we feel like we sort of hadn't got much choice because that's what we've reached, but that, you know, we were probably doing the right thing. You know, we thought he would be there for a short time, he would be assessed properly, and the assessment would lead to a set of recommendations or suggestions or plans that would help Connor and us, and, as I say, people who have to work with Connor, to kind of provide him with the support that he would need going forward into full adulthood.
we just used to sort of ask what they were doing. I remember sitting in a meeting saying, well, where's the assessment and treatment? And they just fob us off. They changed his medication in May time, I think it was April, and Connor was always sensitive to medication change. And I went in to visit him one day, and he was very disorientated and he'd bitten his tongue, and it was obvious to me, as his mum, he'd had a seizure, so I went downstairs and told them. And they'd seen he'd bitten his tongue, but they just thought he'd bitten his tongue, so they'd just given him Blongella. They hadn't made the connection between biting his tongue and epilepsy. So then I sort of said, you know, you need to do something, he's obviously having seizures. And they made noises about doing things. They ordered an epilepsy monitor. It turned out that they decided he wasn't having seizures. Also turned out they were allowing him to bath unsupervised. And inevitably, you know, with hindsight, we didn't know this at the time, but he ended up drowning, which is absolutely, you know, I still cannot believe it. You know, I just can't believe he's just died in such a terrible, wasteful, careless, preventable way.
Sarah and I are both absolutely mortified, horrified, and I feel very aggrieved that the behaviour that we and others that we know have encountered through this experience has been so awful that nobody should have to be going through that experience. Particularly after they've had a bereavement of a child. You know, I mean, it's one thing to have a death in the family, which is something you really, really don't want. It's another thing for it to be your child, which, you know, I never expected to. I mean, you worry about so many things when you have kids, of course. You worry about car accidents, and you worry about all sorts, you know, them not being happy, depressed, maybe they might take drugs, or they might get into a bad fight. You do worry about a lot of things, and one thing they never really worried about was that one of them would die, you know, while being looked after in an NHS hospital.
It's sad that it has happened to Connor, because Connor was a nice young lad, and his mum and dad just probably feel lost without him.
I don't think they were trained properly. They didn't realise what was wrong with him.
Don't necessarily leave them untended in the bath if that's what's required, or give them a shout. You know, it's not rocket science.
When Mum made the vlog, she kind of came up with names for all of us, and then his was laughable, obviously, because he laughs a lot. And then that's how he's like referred to like the campaign and stuff as Justice for LB, and like people who tweet and like read the blog will be like, oh, I feel like this about LB and stuff, and it's kind of just become his sort of persona online.
Well, the LB bills emerged out of the Justice for LB campaign. A sort of small team a small set of people sort of came together to draft this bill, and all sorts of people and organisations joined in. They ran events across the country discussing the bill and getting feedback from their members and group members and all this sort of thing.
The primary objective is to change the way in which the law works at the moment, the process works at the moment, which mean at the moment local authorities and the National Health Service and other providers can pretty much put people where they want. And what our bill proposes is that you simply won't be able to do that. You will have to take full regard of the individual's desires and wishes into account before making them a placement in residential accommodation. The bill tries to at least ensure and encourage that you know, the knowledge, the love, the affection, the care, the experience that families have isn't ignored by providers, and is a full part of the process by which people are not only placed if they have to be placed, but that knowledge is, and that involvement of the family, carers and supporters, is encouraged so that the best possible provision can be provided, or the best level of understanding.
Now, when I met Sarah, she told me the tragic story of her son Connor, who died in an assessment and treatment centre in Oxford. An independent inquiry found that Connor's death could have been prevented. Staff had failed to use his parents' knowledge of his death to make sure he was cared for safely. And not enough effort was made to understand Connor's needs as an individual, a person in his own right. His mother has ever since brilliantly campaigned for change, for a positive legacy for Connor, or Laughing Connor, as he was known. So we have worked with Sarah and her campaign team. I felt it was my responsibility to listen to them and to act. But Connor's case is sadly not unique. Too many families have told me that they felt completely ignored, that no one was listening.
If you read the draft bill and you take out the word learning disability or disabled, it's about disabled people, the fact that we're actually campaigning to give a certain set of people the same rights as everybody else is shameful. People will get behind it when they know about it, and I just think that a number of people in this country are treated so poorly, and I think that is absolutely shameful.
Yeah, I think people often forget that people with learning disabilities need to be heard as well, and that we can't make the decisions for them. I think because we are not disabled, we think that maybe we can make the best decisions for them, but they need to make their own decisions as well.
People need to be more aware, need to make captions and kind of that people can do stuff, but you might need a little bit of support. Yeah, give them the time and the encouragement to do it, and actually let them see what they can do.
We had a Mark Sherry in America, a professor in Toledo, sort of got his students to make a film about what happened to Connor. There's been brownies in New Zealand drawing buses because Connor left buses on the floor at their brownie meeting. We've had a sociologist in Vancouver riding on buses and taking photos of a bus every day to celebrate Connor's life. These people haven't met Connor, they don't know Connor, and yet they recognise injustice of what's happened. They recognise what a quirky and colourful individual he was, and they're acting and they're prepared to say this is wrong, you know, and join in. And I think that's absolutely amazing. It's been so heartwarming and so reassuring that so many people have just stepped up and done all these different things and got in touch and are really moved by it all, and you just get it. I think that's great. I think that has meant the world to us. So my beyond wildest dreams would be that, and we're never going to achieve this in a million years, but would be that we didn't even have to talk about learning disabled people because there wouldn't need to be that division, because everybody would have a right to live where they choose. Everybody has an imagined future, and the distinction between being learning disabled and being non-learning disabled will become sort of irrelevant because it isn't an issue. I suppose that's my wildest dream. But whether that will happen or not, I don't know. So we'll reach for the stars and see what happens. Because I think Connor's up there.
I think the thing that I always reflected on was that, you know, in many respects, the world would be a lot better place if we all behaved more like Connor and less like not Connor's. His sort of approach to life was so straightforward and simple, and again, not in a dismissive way, but uncomplicated, say, rather than simple. But, you know, you just sort of think, I wish I could be more like that. I wish we could all be more like that. I just think, well, the irony is that, you know, as a society, we don't really value people who like Connor, but actually, you know, we should all be more like Connor, and people like Connor, and the world would be a much better place, and it would be much more inclusive place, and actually we might all enjoy it.
He showed me what life should be in a lot of ways, just by doing the things he did in the way he did them.
Okay, we were just quickly thinking, we might take any questions that people have immediately now after the film. We've got a few slides, but we just wondered if anybody had any sort of points of clarification. Not going to go into slides if it doesn't make sense. Not.
Can you just say what the bill is about again?
Okay, so the LB bill was one of the kind of elements of the campaign, and it's a bill that it's a private member's bill, so we haven't got it into Parliament yet. We have to petition MPs and hope that one of them adopts it if they get their name out, drawn out of the hat, so the odds are slim. But the bill is a request that all learning disabled people, all disabled people, get to choose where they live, and if the state wish to remove them from where they live or put them somewhere else, that they have to have a clear rationale for why, essentially. Because at the moment you don't have, despite human rights legislation being in this country, many disabled people don't have the same rights as non-disabled.
So the onus becomes on the person to justify why they should go home again, rather than why they should be removed in the first place.
Okay. Should we carry on and show you some of the things we did? What we're going to do is we're going to show just a few slides and talk to them, and then talk a little bit, and then hopefully have a discussion with you guys. So hopefully there'll be some questions and comments. Stunned people.
Sorry, I'm just trying to make it work.
There you go, thank you. Okay, so the first point to kind of just mention is that this is Sarah's blog. It's a shame Sarah's not here. I think, sorry, I can't remember your name. Last speaker said that she felt quite voyeuristic and a bit odd, and I do personally still feel a little odd talking about Connor and his family's experience. When I never met Connor, I know his family intimately now, but so we're talking about Sarah, Connor, and their family. Obviously we're doing that because, and they're aware and they're happy for us to do that. But just to put that on there. Sarah's blog, My Deaf Life, she started in 2011, and it was a blog essentially about living with Connor and some of the things he came up with. And as the voice said in the film, it was anonymous, so she had characters, so people had pseudonyms, so nobody knew who this blog was. And Connor was referred to as LB, as Laughing Boy, and that's where the campaign name came from. And initially, there are many people who have heard of the campaign who may not know Connor's name, so there's that element of dual identity or different identities, I suppose. And I think it probably is important that Sarah was blogging about Connor before he died, because I was following Sarah's blog. That's the only reason I wrote the blog for. And I think he had an identity online, proxied and via his mum, but he did have a presence online before he died, which I think is probably relevant. Okay, and the campaign that Sarah referenced, when Connor became ill and he went into the unit, he was in the unit for 107 days before he died, and during that time, the blog goes from being this wonderfully happy blog, full of quirky anecdotes and stories, into this painful blog, actually. It's quite hard to read in places. There's a post on about day 56 or 60 something, when he's in the unit, where Sarah actually typed in her blog, "My biggest fear is that he's going to drown in the bath and no one will notice." And obviously that's what happened. I mean, it's awful. If you read the blog now, knowing what happened, if you start at the front and read all the stories, and you get really sucked into this family full of love and stories and quirkiness, and then you read as Connor's health gets worse and the support services just aren't available. They're just not. There is no support there. And then as Sarah's blogging while he's in the unit, so that she blogged every day. So it's quite a powerful diary. It's quite powerful writing. And when his inquest happened, the legal team were actually able to get one of the blog posts into the evidence, because there was an argument saying that's contemporaneous. It's whatever that word is. It's her record. It's not an official record. Even though the NHS records were littered with errors and absences, and they contradict themselves. There's this notion that their records are proper and her blog isn't, but it was included. So the 107 Days campaign happened a whole calendar year after Connor had gone into the unit, and when he died, Sarah was contacted by someone who'd been following her blog online, as somebody who worked in the legal field, and they got in touch and said, this is what you need to do. You need to request a second post-mortem, you need to contact Inquest, a charity that help people whose relatives have died in custody. You need to ask these questions and these questions and these questions. And because of that intervention, very, very early after Connor died, they were able to effectively secure evidence which wouldn't have been there otherwise. And so the online, offline interaction has been really key throughout this. And then what happened as a result of that is there was an official investigation commissioned by the Health Trust with an organisation called Verita, who looked at what happened in the unit. And that investigation, which Norman Lamb references, found that Connor's death was entirely preventable. And that was published in February 2014. Connor died in July 2013, and that report was published in February 2014. And at that point, this online campaign kind of gathered momentum. Sarah and her family and friends had been selling postcards to raise funds for legal fees and artwork, and they had been doing fundraising events. And then we kind of, a few people just contacted Sarah, and we kind of felt that it was important that it had more of a platform, that there was a more coming together when this report came out. So what we decided on was that for the 107 days that Connor was in the unit the following year, that we would mark them by asking people to adopt a day, and that they could adopt a day and they could do either a fundraising activity or an awareness raising activity. Because the other point of information is that if you die in custody of the state, there's no guarantee that your family will get legal aid, so they have to fundraise to get the legal support to question what happened to Connor, even though obviously the NHS Trust don't, they use our taxes for that.
And the inquest alone costs nearly £1 million.
Yeah, for the inquest, for their legal costs. Just for the NHS legal costs. So you can see what sort of battle you're up against. Battle. Oh, these battle methods.
It's also worth saying that the reason the inquest was so important, when in a way it's clear what happened. It's a strange case, because in a way it's quite clear what happened. The reason it was important is the trust early on after Connor's death, days I think after, tried to influence the coroner by suggesting it was a death by natural causes. So they'd actually tried to sort of, in a way, cover up basically Connor's death as being by natural causes, not by neglect. This is somebody in a secure unit under the care of people. So that was why it was so important that it had to, a full inquest was necessary as well.
Which is another, I guess, kind of digital presence that George heroically, because it's a 2-week-long inquest, live tweeted the entire inquest in real time, which again, in terms of kind of preserving as evidence and raising awareness of what actually happened in an inquest. You see a kind of journal summary, actually all the kind of legal near bullying that was going on, the kind of massive legal thing that they had, the kinds of questions which were put to Sarah, the kind of attitudes which were revealed by some of the people who were supposed to be caring for him in that unit. That live tweeting in terms of kind of an online presence, digital presence, was really important. I think the whole.
Yeah. So I'd like to talk about that as well. The coroner's, I think that's really, it was the first live tweeted coroner's inquest in Britain. George tweeted it. So it's just really interesting as a kind of form of brief activism, I think, to the whole campaign, but also the coroner's inquest, in particular what that means in making death and the investigation of death so public via digital technology.
One of the days, so the 107 days had loads of different activities, and by the end, so many people wanted to adopt a day that we had 3 or 4 people on a day, which was great. And one of the activities was a quilt. So Janet Reed, who is a professor at Warwick, had suggested that we might ask people to send patches in, quilt patches, and so we. It's fascinating because if you look at the quilt, you can see how higgledy-piggledy it is. She was very, very, very clear that these patches should be, I think it was 6 by 4, people can't follow basic instructions. So anybody who's talking of doing toolkits for how to help people, bear in mind that this isn't 6x4 and I was that.
They were behaving like Connor.
They were behaving like Connor, which we loved. But people were asked to send in patches if they wished to, and most of the people who contributed, or at least a good chunk of the people who contributed to the quilt, had never met Connor either. They'd been involved with the campaign in some way, they were aware of his story, or they were aware of, they have family members, or they had learning disabilities themselves, and we had over 200 patches sent from across the world, and Janet and four of her friends had the heroic task of stitching all of these patches together and coming up with the Justice quilt, which I don't think there's postcards. I think Hannah had just a section on your tables if you'd like one, because the slides don't really do it justice. It has visited Lancaster twice, so it's got a bit of a spiritual home at Lancaster, I think. But the quilt again combines the online and offline, because people were able to send their patch, and then we had this collective whole. And of course, you take it. And on the trip up to Lancaster with it, we launched it in Lancaster September 2014, and Sarah and I carried it, and we had a meeting in London, and then we carried it from London up to Lancaster. And if you're on a train with a massive quilt, it's a conversation starter. And it's a very, people want to know, it looks a bit like a carpet, but it's not, and people want to know what it is, and it's a great way of actually starting conversations. So that's the quilt. And we've tried to use craftivism elsewhere. Just recently, so another report came out. So one of the things that Sarah and Rich did when we set the campaign up is they identified what would justice look like, what would it look like for Connor, what would it look like in terms of what should the NHS or local authority be doing, what would it look like in terms of what society should be doing to improve the lives of people with learning disabilities. And one of the things that they did is they met the then chief exec of the NHS, a guy called David Nicholson. I think it was 2 days before he retired, and they said to him, we're really concerned that Connor isn't a one-off, and we're really concerned that actually within this trust, if you look at their board papers and some of the concerns that have been raised, this could be a bigger problem, this could be a bigger issue. And what David Nicholson did is he commissioned, or he agreed that NHS England would commission a further investigation into all of the deaths of people who'd used learning disability and mental health services in this health trust from 2011 to 2015. And that was published, well, it was leaked to the BBC just before Christmas, and it was published, anybody who's UK based, you may have seen it on the news, we're quite pleased with it on BBC News 3 days running, where they found that there were 10,000 people who died during that period, most of whose death probably were not unexpected, but of the people whose deaths were unexpected, in terms of people with a learning disability, only 1% of those unexpected deaths had any investigation. And that's quite a horrifying statistic if you think that only 1% did. How many other lives could potentially have been saved if they'd got any learning, and how many could have been prevented? And why is it that people with a learning disability are so low in the priority order for people that they don't matter in life and they don't even matter in death? So, when Mazars came out, sorry, I was on the craftivism angle. So when Mazars came out, there was a protest of gingerbreads, which was a similar sort of thing. We'd said to people that they send us gingerbread, small sort of gingerbread men about this size, made of cloth and stitched. What they can make them look however they like, and we produced, again, some of Sarah's friends produced these beautiful big display boards with 337, I think it is, gingerbreads, which represented the people with learning disabilities who died in Southern healthcare during this time. And so it's this completely diverse panel, and the creativity and involving other people's skill has really worked to show the colourful lives that people with learning disabilities should have, and indeed some of them do have. So that's kind of the craftivism angle. And then this is, actually that isn't patch from the quilt, however, I was using it to kind of show the Twitter link. We have, I have a love-hate relationship with Twitter. I'm kind of done with it now. I've been on the platform for years, but I don't think we'd have a campaign without it, so I'm kind of stuck with it a little bit. We have the Justice campaign Twitter account, and then the other account was the Inquest account, which we were just mentioning then. So I don't know if you want to talk a bit about the Inquest.
I want to ask about the legal situation between the Inquest. So did you get permission? How did you negotiate that? Obviously, they said this is a coroner's hearing with a public jury, so some coroner's hearings have juries. this one did. And then there's the family and all the legal teams in the courtroom. So it's coroner's hearings have got kind of particular type of legal status. They're not like a courtroom hearing, but they are still a courtroom, but coroner's courtroom. But I wondered about that because this has never been done before. So what's the kind of legal technicalities? Have you been allowed to do that, or did you just do it?
I would have just done it, however. No, so the coroner's court is open court when the jury is sitting. So when the jury is sitting, it's public. Connor's legal team were made up of 3 absolutely amazing people. Paul Bowen, who's a QC, Keelan Gallagher, who's a barrister, and Charlotte Hayward-Heard, who's a solicitor. And then they had some people working with them as well. But Keelan is a barrister who was particularly interested in open justice. So I felt totally secure because she said you're allowed to tweet and we don't need to ask permission, but we probably should flag it because we felt that if we didn't flag it in advance, the trust would put an objection in, and then if we hadn't sorted it out, it wouldn't happen. And as it happened, the agreement was nobody tried to stop us. One of the legal teams did mention that they weren't happy with it after day 2 or 3, I think. But when asked to put the objections in writing, just backed down again. So I think that was just a simple kind of like, we're just going to push you a bit and hope that you moderate your behaviour. But what we did with the inquest account was live tweet just what people said. So it was intentional. There was no commentary on there. It was literally what people said throughout the 2 weeks. There was an archive, a record, because you have a recording, but you then have to pay to get that transcribed or what have you. And we wanted people to see in real time what was going on. And actually, I think the inquest was quite horrific in a way. I was only rereading the tweets at Christmas, like you do, and realising how awful some of what we were, I was so in the zone typing it, I don't think we'd process it in many ways. But the Chief Coroner has since issued guidance about live tweeting inquests. So it's kind of got to go ahead. Because previously journalists would have sent 1 or 2, but journalists have to walk a careful line as well because they're not public either in a weird way. They have a different kind of role.
So what were they saying? What were they saying?
In terms of what did the tweet say? Or?
Well, if you tweeted what they were saying, and what did they say?
Oh, so in the inquest there were, there was 8 legal teams, because individual members of staff had legal teams, and the trust had a legal team, and the family had 1 team. And then they interviewed key witnesses, so members of staff, the clinical director of the trust, people who've been caring for Connor, and they tried to, the pathologist, and they tried to kind of construct what happened to him. They looked at the medical records, they pulled it up on a screen to share with court, and basically the way that it worked is they just asked witnesses what had happened at certain points or certain instances, or what had happened when Connor was in their care. And the end result of that was that the jury found that his death was contributed to by neglect, which was quite significant because it's quite hard to get that outcome. And they felt that because there was an expert witness as well who was quite key, I think, who was an expert in epilepsy, and she actually said in court when asked that she'd reviewed a lot of the paperwork and she'd done this exercise and produced a statement for the court before the inquest. And when asked by Paul, she said that she felt that it was actually what happened on the ground was much worse, but she hadn't been aware of that from the paperwork, which I think is a real issue as well. We read paperwork and policy and we think it's right and proper and that's what happens, but there's a massive gap between what your policies say and then what happens in care.
I think that the live tweeting really exposed because the Ministry of Justice say people don't need legal aid because it's not an adversarial process. Actually, one of the things that, because I was kind of sitting there going, excuses. You've got kind of Sarah, 1 legal team, plus 7 legal teams who, in effect, become hostile. And they can all question her in turn. The kind of the imbalance and the whole, I just went for 1 day to observe. And even the kind of legal wrangling outside when the jury was in the room, every little thing, those kind of legal teams were kind of pushing for something. They were always pushing for something. And you could see kind of Sarah Rich's legal team working out what's the agenda here. There's that whole kind of courtroom thing which is a mile away from establishing the truth. A mile, that is not what the trust lawyers are there for. And the live tweeting really exposed that.
Can we have questions from the audience? Can I ask a question? How does that relate to what you were saying at the beginning, Imogen, the cultures of accountability and how lives are counted? Because that seems to be at the heart of it to me.
I mean, it's at the heart of it for me as well. I mean, this is quite a complicated question around counting and accountability. Clearly, the counting of deaths is central to lots of forms of political activism, thinking about counting deaths in wars, political projects to count deaths at borders. And it's where counting relates to questions of other accountability is really interesting to me, and what's happening to accountability. So I think how you get justice, how you get accountability is something that's transforming at the moment in the context of shift to market forms of welfare. By welfare I mean the broad sense, NHS, forms of social care and welfare. So as the welfare state shrinks and becomes marketised and different sets of values are activated through financialisation, actually I think accountability structures transform in that process and become devolved and detached and actually add on and inconsequential. And I don't think we can think of that as just a kind of side effect of the marketisation processes that we're seeing under neoliberal modes of government, but actually they're a central part of it. They're actually a strategic political part of it. So I've been trying to think about, through Connor's afterlife in this amazing campaign, I've been trying to think about questions of accountability, and actually what you get is rituals or performances of accountability that are baseless. So what's really clear, for example, is that Jeremy Hunt, when the Mazars report was leaked, which is I mean, you really must read it if you're interested in this case, because it's a devastating but quite clinical critique of what's happened, what's happening in Southern Health, and the fact none of these names have been investigated. Is that Jeremy Hunt, who's our health secretary, stood up in Parliament and was forced to do a public apology to the mum, to Sarah, and to say thank you for your campaign. Thank you so much for this unbelievable campaign that's exposed what's going on in this health trust, and there are national implications of this. And you think, oh my, it's on, Jeremy Hunt's having to apologise, isn't that fantastic? The campaign's had an impact. Is this accountability, you think? And it's not, it's a ritual or a performance of accountability. And I actually went back and read what's actually quite hard to find now, but you can find it online. There's a book that Jeremy Hunt himself wrote called something like Direct Democracy, which is about how to get the Conservative Party back in power. And he writes about needing to make sure that government is not accountable, and how part of a kind of neoliberal project of kind of cutting off or marketising or selling off, shrinking the state, is actually also a political project to remove accountability from central government and, if you like, localise it. And of course that's spun as a form of empowerment, the idea that if it's local it's about empowering people, it's a big society, the ideologies sometimes called you. But actually what it does is remove accountability, and what you get is these kind of rituals of accountability that are kind of baseless in terms of effects. I mean, there's lots of things of that in history, but there's something about the present time that this relates to, particularly that this case can tell us a lot about.
We've got.
To say, is that right?
And then we've got Bridget, Jenny, and Alan, if that's okay.
So I mean, it's the kind of the digitisation of information kind of invites scrutiny, seems to invite scrutiny, but it resists it at every time. So the deaths of people with learning disabilities are literally visible. It's not required to state learning disability on a death certificate, so you can call out and you can look at differences in death rates. We know that people with learning disabilities generally die about 20 years earlier. Assumption is made that that's kind of inevitable, but actually the kind of health inequalities and the treatment that underpins that. So there's a constant fight against a kind of eugenic approach, a kind of soft cloaked eugenic approach to these people's lives are literally worthless. These people are quite literally not human. You know, there are probably very few memorials in any format in terms of, you know, the deaths of people with learning disabilities as a whole. And Justice Ravi is part of that, but it's so much more different from that. The fact that the inquest verdicts of coroners are not archived online is astonishing to me, because then you can't interrogate. One of the things that comes up about a particular trust Southern Health is the sheer number of inquests that are going on in different places, different coroners' courts around the country relating to people who died there. No one ever pulls that together. You know, the coroners never pull that together to come to some view. So every time the trust can say, "Oh, we've learned lessons from this."
On a journey.
Yes, they're on their own. Every death is a learning opportunity for them, as they've said. But it's really hard to hold to account, because although there's so much stuff supposedly online, digital, it's hard to know where to look. It's hard to find it. And again, a kind of way to defend against scrutiny is to write it in such bureaucratical, impossible to understand language, that actually it's really hard to make sense and see the significance of what you see. So it's really difficult to hide things in completely plain sight, because you write things in ways that are completely incomprehensible to anyone else. So I've only been here this morning, but people with learning disabilities, I think, are a real challenge to this group. Many people with learning disabilities don't have formal language. What do we do in terms, you know, much of the kind of memorial stuff that's been discussed is very text-based, very language-based. People are kind of invisible hide. There are also kind of socio-economic, structural inequalities there in terms of who will get access to the kind of memorials which have been discussed here. How is that played out? What assumptions of the human are we making in this room? And does that exclude people? Does that exclude certain groups of people? I think those are, I guess, just some of the kind of reflections from this side.
It's all right.
Hi, yeah, I'm kind of linking what Imogen and Chris said.